Hey everybody, Swab here. I don't really do reviews, but I do really like to talk about games. I recently had the opportunity to play Harrow County, the Game of Gothic Conflict, with the designers and one other player. And this game is still in development, and so things might change. And combined with the fact that I only played the introductory rule set of Chapter 1, take this as first impressions of a game that I enjoyed playing. So if you want to hear me talk about a game that hasn't been published at the time of the video release, and I've only played one time, and I've only played one side of a two-player asymmetrical game, feel free to stick around and hear what I have to say. Before I get into the game proper, first, let me say that Shad and Jay, they're two incredibly pleasant people. This is no bearing on the game itself, but it definitely colors the opinion of their creation when you know the people who made the game were nice to you. Shad's generous with compliments, and Jay exudes excitement when he speaks about his game. If you listen to them, you're definitely going to want to support their awesome creations. Now, Harrow County, as mentioned earlier, is a two-player game with additional options for solo and three-player and whatever, and I can't speak to them because I haven't experienced them. In this game, you are playing within the world of the comic series that's created by Cullen, Bunn, and Tyler Crook. You play two sides of conflict that's warring with each other over the people in the land of Harrow County. The Protector, played by my opponent, they were trying to protect Harrow County, and they gain most of their victory points by moving townsfolk across the map to safety. They do this by creating a water brigade style chain of haints and paths that allow the townsfolk to flee to the Protector's home space. The side I played, known as a family, is trying to create storms that will destroy the homes of Harrow County residents. You can also score points by defeating your opponent's haints, and the haints there are like mini-like assistants, and by holding the center of the board, which is known as the bramble. Once one player hits 7 points, you're going to finish up the round, and then you're going to see who has the most points when the game's actually over. You alternate actions, and each player selects a mason jar to smash, releasing whatever trapped inside, and it's a thematic underpinning. What really it boils down to is selecting one of the available actions and then performing it. And you're going to flip the token over to show that it's been used. You get to select 3 of the 4 actions each round, and then they all reset at the end of the round. Each player has the same 4 options available to them, but some options play out a bit differently depending on who you're playing as. And the actions let you use your ability tokens, let you attack, use your legend action. A legend is like the hero character on the board, or use wild tokens. And the wild tokens, they stand in for ability tokens. Knowing when to do what is a huge part of the game. Now, after that overview, I'm going to dig into my first impressions. I'm going to be upfront, and I'm going to say that this is going to be a string of positive statements, or maybe neutral statements at worst. So if you're looking for me to talk about things I don't like, you're not really going to find that. I don't like talking about things I don't like, so at least when it comes to entertainment. So if I'm going to put the effort into making video, which is something I don't do all that often, I'm only going to really put this effort in if it's something I enjoyed and want to talk about. Anyway, let's talk about everything that's good about Harrow County. First is the map. At first glance, it kind of looks like someone put out the Island of Catan, but I can't hold that against this game, because it's an easy-to-read hex board with different terrain types. The importance of the terrain type isn't always obvious in the first chapter's play, but it does become more important in future chapters. Or at least that's what I thought when I played it. But of course, I'm completely wrong, as terrain is always important, but I'll get back to that later. Just don't let me forget. The thing about the map that I love is that it's a perfect size. It's big enough to make reaching the townsfolk or the building a bit of a challenge and requires focus and effort, but the map's also small enough that it's not really hard to position yourself in a way that you can strike at your opponent with an attack action. And of course, if you're close enough to hit them, then they are close enough to attack you back. I saw someone comparing this game to chess, and I agree that it has the same feeling you get when you're playing chess, in that you have lots of options, but if you select poorly, you'll not be setting yourself up for future plays, or worse, you're going to be falling into your opponent's trap. There is also that little bit of spin where the center of the board is so important for both chess and for this game. Though with Harrow County, sitting in the center is also the most dangerous place to be because it's easier to be harmed and attacked. You take damage. It costs less cubes to damage yourself. We'll get back to that later, potentially, maybe. So all that being said, the pure open information of chess, it's not here in Harrow County. Instead, there's this RNG beast that lives next to the board, and that beast is a cube tower, which is built into the box for better or for worse. The cube tower is used to see if an attack was successful and how many of a player's haints are destroyed. And like all good cube towers, what's dropped in is not always what comes out. You can assume if you have more cubes. which represents your strength in a battle, you should win the fight. However, the fate of the tower means your level of success is always unknown until the last cube drops. It is the perfect amount of randomness that means each attack is a nail biter for both parties. In my game, the cube tower didn't seem to want to side with me at all, especially for the first portion of the game, and some of my attacks were feeble and they were kind of a waste of an action. That's exactly why the cube tower is so great, though. It's always going to bring groans of sadness, it's going to bring cheers of elation. It's also, in my opinion, more fun than counting successes on dice faces. Randomness is also the great equalizer. It allows players more experience to still have potential problems, even if the strategy is sound. The more experienced player is going to win more often, but it also gives a player a fighting chance. I like to think of this like mana flood or mana screw as a great equalizer in Magic the Gathering. Whenever I play against a better opponent, which is almost every time I play, I'm always kind of hoping that will help balance things out. And if you've played Magic, you know this, but if you haven't, Mana Flood is when you get too many resource cards, and so you're not drawing useful cards out of the deck to complete your objective, defeating your opponent. And Mana Screw is when you get not enough resources to pay for all the cards that you want to put on the table. And so the Cube Tower, it's kind of that similar aspect that it stands in for the same thing. Randomness gives hope just as much as it dashes out the best laid plans. Thirdly, the choice of actions and the action economy is super delightful. Having 4 actions available and only being able to do 3 of them per round makes your choice matter. And not only do you have to choose when to use each action, as it can be done once, but you also just choose which one to skip. That's painful because you want to do all of the actions, and you want to do all of the actions multiple times. These choices are all about pre-planning your moves, but also being ready to react to your opponent, because no plan survives contact with the enemy, and the alternating action selection means you constantly have to reassess your potential plan. What makes these action choices even more special is that even though both sides have the same action to choose from, some of them work a little differently depending on if you're the protector of the family. One of the actions is, unsurprisingly, the action that allows you to do your legend's ability and your unique power. So each legend, which is your hero character on the board, has an ability that helps them to achieve the goal of destroying buildings or saving townsfolk. In the game that I played, the family could place paths, which helps build a route for the townsfolk to flee along, or they could place barbed wire to limit the progress of their opponents. And the family, who I played as, they could place storms using haints instead of just their legend. However, the real big difference is the ability action. The ability action gives you access to your movement and lets you build strength for combat, and it helps you spawn more of the haints that are so helpful to the game. And this action choice is very different. The family, which is character I used, the side that I used, they use the ability action as like a bag building mechanism, where they're pulling on a number of random abilities and they get to perform them. And then they put some or all those ability tokens back in the bag to be drawn again. And this means that this action can give you exactly the right mix of unique actions to take, or it can give you a bunch of disjointed, unappealing options. It's basically the trail mix problem, where one handful is a perfect mix of like nuts and chocolate and dried fruit, and then the next handful is all raisins and stale sunflower seeds. You do get to call the tokens you don't want, but even then, each token does have a purpose and a use at certain times, and so you might want them in the next round. So, for example, if I really want to be able to move 2 spaces, and then maybe I want to be able to spawn a haint this turn, so I have more haints in a certain space, I really got to hope that I draw those right things. And if I really only draw a bunch of strengthened tokens to like help me with future combat, it's not giving me what I want right then and now. Now, the protectors, that ability action, they get to pick exactly what they want, which is far better than drawing randomly out of a bag and to do what the bag tells you. But there's a big catch to this, in that you can only do one of the 3 choices. You can only move, or you can only spawn, or you can only strengthen. Often you want to do more than one of those things, but you have to pick just one. So you gotta select the option that's most important in that moment, and then you gotta use the different abilities instead to complete those other tasks you want to do. This is the perfect asymmetrical gameplay thing, because both sides look at their opponent and they wish they could use the power the way their opponent was using it. And I love when both players think their opponent is overpowered or does something better than they do. And this game does that really well. I'm sure there are more examples of this, but the ability token action is like the one that stands out. Now, let's talk about how wonderful the passing of the first player token is. With how actions alternate, it means that the second player will get the last action of the current round, and then the first action of the next round. And this keeps the first player on their toes, as they need to prepare for their opponent to have 2 actions in a row. It's kind of like worrying that your opponent gets the last rock in curling, but it's even bigger of a deal. You need to prepare, but you also never know if you have enough actions to really do so. Knowing the second player will sneak in some moves unimpeded is stressful, but, of course, assuming the game doesn't end, you get to do the same thing in the next round. So it's an expertly crafted pendulum, where when you get the double action, you feel like you're on top of the world, and then the next turn you're dreading when your opponent gets the same to experience that same feeling that you just did. A good game makes you think about it after you're done. Chris Miller, the Secret Cabal Gaming Podcast, is a gentleman I've stolen this metric from. And he's a bit more specific, and he states that a good game makes you think about your plays long after the game, and you think about alternate strategies you could try the next time you play, to see if they're viable ways to reach your win condition. Here's the whole reason I made the video. Once the game was over, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And it's been about a week now, and I still can't stop thinking about it. I desperately want to try the game again. Could I make better use of my actions to grab what I need to win? Could I approach my tactics with more finesse? Could I select better moments to make my moves? So now, for the rest of this little bit of the video, I want to share a few things that sat in my brain as I reflected on the game. Hearing these things might show some of the strategy, and maybe it'll tickle that part of your brain that wants to try the game too. So first, let's go back to the terrain types on the map and how they are in fact important, starting right at chapter 1. Earlier in the video I said that they don't matter as much as in the first chapter. That's categorically false, and I should have paid it way more mind. For those who paid attention, the setup for chapter 1, you're going to realize that the ability tokens, they aren't randomized like they are in different chapters, but they're attached to a specific terrain type, right? And that should flag in your brain certain terrain types are going to give you certain kinds of token benefits. And of course, I completely failed to pay attention to that during the playthrough, which meant that I failed to grab the legend tokens to power up my legend's action. And if I'd made sure I traveled to the right spots and taken me going through a forest terrain type, I could have gobbled up the tokens, and I could have made my storms much easier to cast about. And of course, storms are the way to destroy buildings, which therefore gives me the most points, right, as playing this as a family. Furthermore, Levi's power, and I assume the powers of the other legends, is best utilized when you want to move your Haints with your special legend action, as the terrain the legends and the Haints are standing on, or near, allow Levi to move them or not move them. So speaking more about Levi, the legend that I played as, I didn't really understand him very well at the start of the game, and here's a helpful hint. When a game gives you a powerful unit, don't let it sit and do nothing. If I had moved Levi forwards earlier, I could have made more storms, which would let me destroy more buildings. And since the majority of my points are from destroying buildings, I really should have made sure that I was focusing on that goal. This game clearly puts a lot of effort into giving you unique, powerful characters, and the fact that each one works a bit, or maybe a lot, differently, means that there's so much potential discovery available to players. The wild action is a facet of the game I also did not explore enough, but my opponent made great use of this action, and it definitely assisted them in taking the lead to winning the game. What is amazingly powerful about the wild action is that you gain a wild token each time you select the wild action. And each token lets you perform one ability action of your choice, which is incredibly powerful, right? Just like any wild does. But here is the reason I want to play it again, and why I want to focus on this action more, is that the game is super generous with wild tokens. In most games, you'd have to trade in your wild to get the bonus, right? And then you don't have that wild again. But in Harrow County, you keep that token, which means that each time you select the wild action, it becomes stronger and stronger because you have more and more tokens to use. You can take way more actions with it. And could I focus strategy around this? Probably. And I want to try to. And then lastly, I want to talk about the King of the Hill element of the game. And it's something I did a little bit in the beginning, and I wish I'd done more. And that's managing to end your round while your Haints are in the center hex of the board, in the bramble, because that allows you to score a point at the end of the round. And a single juicy point just for standing in a really useful spot in the middle of the board where you can command more of the board. Like, obviously, it's great. Sign me up. However, there's this cost. It's so much more easier to destroy units that are in the bramble. It costs less cubes and strength the attack action. And it's such a tough call as to whether it's worth holding that spot, leaving you vulnerable. But when you can, have those extra points really helps you secure or catch up with the leader. So in closing, I hope that maybe I made it clear to you this is a game worth pursuing. Or at least, is it a game worth pursuing for yourself? For me, I know it is. I know that I can't wait to get back into playing the game again, and I think that this is going to be a go-to game for me. The head-to-head battle of staying ahead of my opponent, making both tactical and strategic choices, while we fight over the fictional small town, sounds like a perfect game for me. So thanks for listening to me talk about a game that I enjoy. That's my ramble about Harrow County, and hopefully some of you who might listen to this video at some point might be interested in taking a game for a spin. All right, take care. Bye-bye.